Well, hello there, and welcome back once again to the Pilgrim's Path podcast. And if you're new here, I want you to know that this is the channel for you. Why do I say that? Well, if you have a passion to explore and understand and apply God's Word in a world that has so fervently and ardently denounced Christ in a culture that is just rampant with sin and immorality. If that is a passion that you have to separate yourself from the world and make yourself known as a Christian, as a follower of Christ, then welcome here. You're welcome here. And I want you to engage, and I want to engage with you as well. And in some of my past videos, I've gotten a few comments. I've had a couple of debates, online, especially my first video, actually, where I talked about Calvinism with my wife, my beautiful wife, Nancy, who unfortunately hasn't been able to make an appearance on the show in a while as my co-host. And that's mostly due to the fact that we have our youngest son, Cedric. He's come into the world, praise the Lord, about 5 months ago. Actually, closer to 6 months now. He's almost 6 months old. So that's awesome. But yeah, it's been a little bit difficult to schedule good time. He is not the best napper. I'll say that much. And when he is napping, I'm usually busy. So yeah. Or our daughter Lucy is awake when he's napping. It's kind of a hard situation there. But anyway, welcome here. And yeah, again, if you're new here, if this is your first time stumbling across the Pilgrim's Path podcast, you may notice that we're a small channel. We're I think about 65 subscribers, which, hey, thank you guys. You 65 for subscribing. Thank you so much. And if you're not subscribed, please take the time to click that subscribe button, hit the like button, share the video, comment on the video, even just a simple comment, even if it's a hostile comment, or even if it's a criticism. I got a critique the other day of one of my videos. I had it titled, is 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 9 a proof text against Calvinism or something? I forget what the title is of that video, but anyway, and somebody corrected me the other day on the comments and said, I think you mean 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9, and whoever that person was, that's very correct. I did mean 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. I'll have to change that yet. But anyway, so again, one of the things that I like to do here is talk theology. But I've been thinking it, and I've had a burden. I've had a burden ever since, especially, well, before that, but since Charlie Kirk got assassinated, I've had a burden for engaging in the culture war, as they call it. And I know that a lot of the Reformed folk have problems with that. And, a lot of the Mennonite folk. If you're around Alberta, Canada, if you're in Canada and you're in the Mennonite community, which is where I'm from, I hope that you listen to this, and I hope that maybe you can be swayed a little bit by what I'm about to say. But I think that we ought to engage in the culture as Christians. I think that we have a duty to do that, actually. And I guess one of the reasons that I have for that is, well, I'm a postmillennialist now. I wasn't before. I was a premillennialist. And then I kind of strayed into the amillennial, panmillennial stage where I didn't really know what my eschatology was at all. And I'm still, I'm quite ignorant when it comes to eschatology compared to, I think, Reformed theology, Calvinism. But I have to say that I think I'm a postmillennialist. And so therefore, I think that gradually the world is going to get better and better and better, very gradually. There's going to be dips. There's going to be long dips of persecution and sad, terrible times. And I think we're in a dip, as Doug Wilson likes to say. The culture war has been at its hardest for a long time now, with the sexual revolution and feminism run rampant and homosexuality being normalized, gay marriage being legalized, gay mirage, all the transgender madness and the race baiting and all of this chaos just ensuing. And it's because I think we have allowed the lunatics, the lefty lunatics, to take over the culture. We've allowed them to take over the arts. And that's what my most recent Substack post is about. I titled it Our Dire Need for Beauty. And so if you want to read it, I'm not going to read it out loud here. I'm just going to maybe read a couple of sections and talk about it, overview it. If you want to read it, though, you go ahead and search me up on Substack. I'll probably leave the link, the handle in the description of this video. Right, so basically, within the Christian community, there's this idea that, especially in Alberta and Canada, in the Mennonite community, anything that's not talking about, how do I put this? If you're not talking about the Bible, then you shouldn't be talking at all, basically, is the application. For example, you shouldn't get involved in politics, because what business do Christians have in politics, right? The Christian should be spiritually minded, heavenly minded, not earthly minded, not focused on things below, but on things above. Seek my kingdom first, and all these things will be added to you, Jesus said, right? And I can see that. I can see that argument. But I think then we have to understand, okay, well, in what way were those passages meant to be applied? Seek not the things below, but the things above. For the things below are temporal, but the things above are eternal. What does that mean? Does that mean that we should avoid money altogether? Does that mean we should avoid feeding ourselves with food, or should avoid all kind of maybe we shouldn't have jobs, secular jobs, right? I'm an electrician right now. Most of the people that I work with aren't Christians, probably. There's a few. So, what was I getting at? So should I be an electrician if I'm a Christian, or should I just have a job that involves talking about the Bible all day, every day, right? Which I would love. Don't get me wrong. I would love that. And that's one of the things I've been feeling convicted about, is also is in light of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I've been thinking about, man, am I called to be a pastor? I don't know. It's been a struggle for the last few years trying to figure that out. But like I said in my last video, well, no, I won't get into that right now. But anyway, so we have this idea that if you talk about politics or philosophy or Even okay, in our evangelical church, one thing that really bothers me is the idea that we shouldn't think about doctrine. So we shouldn't be so hard set on doctrine. We should just believe in Jesus and that's it. Just believe in Jesus, give him your heart and worship him, and that's all you need to worry about, man. Yeah, yeah. Let's just chill, just relax. Let go and let God, man. And I used to be very hippie-esque, so that used to resonate with me, that message, but not anymore. Not anymore, no. We need doctrine. We need good doctrine, meaty doctrine, right? Well, is it Paul or Peter who chastises us for having to take milk when we should be taking meat already, right? The church, like at a certain point, you have to stop being fed milk and start being fed meat, and you have to take in the strong doctrine. Paul says that this tradition that we have handed down to you, keep it, teach it. He says to Timothy, teach these doctrines. Don't just the gospel. Yes, the gospel is the center of all things. It's the most important message, but the gospel is not only Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? The gospel is in all the doctrines, right? All of the doctrines lead to the gospel and reflect the gospel and apply the gospel. So when you're talking about women in head coverings, right, there is an application to the gospel in that. And the same goes for women submitting to their husbands, submitting to their husbands, and children obeying your parents as in the Lord, and husbands honoring your wives. All of these things, they have application in the gospel, and so they're important. Doctrine is important. Theology is important. Let's get our theology straight. Let's have a clear understanding of what we believe, why we believe it. That's one of our issues. If we have a debate with an atheist, why do you believe what you believe? And a lot of Christians, and me included, I would have a hard time answering, why do I believe the Bible is true? Well, because the Bible says it's true, right? I mean, that's circular reasoning. It's true in a sense, right? Because the Word of God is authoritative over all aspects of life, and so when we make an appeal to an authority, it ought to be to God always, first and foremost, because God says so, right? Well, why is the Word of God authoritative? Well, because God says it is, and that's true. But we need to go beyond that. We need to go further than that, and deeper into that. Not away from that. I'm not advocating for a Christless message, a Christless conservatism, for example, which is just as bad as a false religion. Anyway, so I want to talk about the arts. I want to talk about art in general, but story specifically. And so I think that we as conservative Bible-believing Christians, this is something I say here in my essay, we conservative Bible-believing Christians should not be content with only the conversations about politics, theology, philosophy. We shouldn't be content with those only. And I contend that the arts, just as much as these other areas, if not more so, are vital to the spiritual health of individuals as well as civilizations. Now, why do I say that? It's kind of one of those things. It's like, how could art be vital and to civilization, to individual spiritual health? And it can be a hard thing to grasp. Maybe you think you don't need the arts. I know plenty of conservative Bible-believing Christians who don't read books, who don't watch films, and not all books and films are good, obviously. But there was a quote from C.S. Lewis in The Weight of Glory. Oh, I wish I could remember things like this offhand. Basically, he says that you will indeed be reading, but if you're not reading good books, you will read bad books. And now if you apply that to movies or any kind of content, you will either be consuming good content or bad content. Yeah. Your YouTube videos that you watch, the music you listen to, the movies you watch, the books you read, you will either be consuming good or bad. So, with that in mind, how do we know what's good and what's bad? Is there an objective standard? Is there objectively good art and objectively bad art, or is it all subjective? Is it all according to our own desires and likes and preferences? I think there's a mixture. It's a mixture of both. I think there is subjectivity within the objectivity, but I think the objectivity is very, very plain and true, and steadfast. So, for example, the Waltz in A minor by Johann Brahms, I believe, is objectively a beautiful piece of classical music. You may not like classical music, but it is objectively beautiful, and you are wrong for not liking it. I'm going to stand by that. You can challenge me on that, but I'm going to stand by that. Likewise, the Lord of the Rings books, the Narnia novels, are objectively good. The Pilgrim's Progress is objectively good. You may not like it, you may not enjoy it, but you're wrong to not enjoy it, okay? But, and I think that has more to apply to Christian art. So Christian art is, well, no, I don't know. So I go on to talk about Hallmark movies in this essay a little bit. Those Christian Hallmark movies like God's Not Dead, which, to be fair, I haven't even seen that movie. I've seen the trailer. But movies like that, like it, are just bad. The acting is bad. The production is bad. The script is bad. And it just gives Christians a bad name. It just gives us a bad rep. Why? Are we supposed to cater to the culture, to the standards that they've set for what makes a good film or movie? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that there's objectively bad acting, and a lot of those movies where they just have a clearly systematized gospel message preached throughout the movie. Characters literally preaching the gospel usually are bad movies. And this is why. It may seem contrary to Christianity to say this, right? But how can a movie with the gospel be a bad movie? Well, thing is, art is not a substitute for preaching. So, preaching is the preacher's job. And the preacher preaches, the pastor preaches, the teachers teach, the prophets prophesy, the evangelists evangelize, the artists don't. And there's a certain sense in which they evangelize and prophesy. C.S. Lewis was certainly a prophet-like figure in that hideous strength. But you see, the arts are not for that. The arts, if we hold art to that standard, if we say that this is what art should be, then we are misusing art and we're using it for our own ends. We're trying to manipulate people rather than just making a good piece of art. Just make a good movie. Something like The Lord of the Rings is much more effective than those Hallmark Christian movies, right? The dispensational premillennial movies, with Kirk Cameron and stuff. Yeah, so The Lord of the Rings, I mean, the movies, there's some debate, are they good compared to the books? The books are always way better, and the movies stray quite a bit from the books, honestly. But I still enjoy the movies. I enjoy them. I enjoy the overall aesthetic and the feel of the movies, the music and the acting and the characters for the most part, and the world building is still it's there and it's good and it's beautiful, right? It's good. And you have the character of Frodo. The character of Frodo, he goes on this long journey of self-sacrifice. And in the end, he's not even the one to really throw the ring in the fire. It's basically, he turns bad at the end. He turns sour. But Gollum comes in there by divine providence and allows for the happy ending. But nonetheless, Frodo carries a burden throughout the whole series. He carries a heavy burden, and he carries it for his friends. And he's going to Mount Doom for the purpose of sacrificing, probably sacrificing his own life, right, for his friends. And Gandalf does the same thing with the Balrog when he sacrifices himself to save his friends and for the greater good, for the greater purpose of saving Middle-earth. Those are both selfless characters. And then Gandalf comes back to life. He's resurrected right after he dies. He comes back to life as Gandalf the White instead of Gandalf the Grey. And he comforts and encourages and strengthens and helps and fights alongside his friends as they do battle with the evil forces. And he gives them wisdom, daily wisdom. And he helps them to avert a lot of serious catastrophes. And then there's Aragorn, who is a noble character. In the books, in the movies, he struggles with the calling of being king. He kind of reluctantly takes up that calling until the very end. But in the books, there's none of that reluctance. Like, he knows what his purpose is. He is supposed to be the king, and he knows that. And I think that's better. Because that's like we have this idea that if we're totally 100% sure and confident about our calling, about where we're supposed to be in life, and we don't apologize for pursuing that with our whole heart and whole mind and whole strength, we assume that that's a selfish desire or a selfish ambition. But really, that's just confidence. Like, Aragorn, he knows what he's called to do, and he does it. It's faithfulness. And he's faithful to his friends to the end, right? He's faithful to the end. He resists the temptation of the ring, as does Gandalf. And he gives himself to his friends, even though, he knows there's probably no hope. He humbles himself to the position of Strider, and then knowing who he is, knowing that he's the king, and then he goes and he leads an army of dead out into battle against evil, and So anyway, what was I getting at? Oh my goodness, now I kind of forget. Right, that is more effective in my opinion, and I think it is more effective than the Hallmark movies. I mean, one of the problems you have with those Hallmark Christian movies is that they treat people like they're 2-year-olds, and they feed them mush. They don't give them meat. They give them milk, right? And it's not even milk. It's like almond milk. It's distilled. It's not even real milk. It's white water, right? It's murky and it's gross. It's not very good. It leaves a kind of bitter taste to the mouth. That's those movies, and I can understand. Kind of the older Mennonite community enjoys those, and they appreciate those because there's no swearing and there's no violence and there's no nudity or sexuality and there's no homosexuality in them, right? But that's assuming also that all of those things are necessarily wrong in any form of art or any form of film or book. And I think there's a good argument for why violence and the scary creatures are necessary in books and movies. Anyway, but that's for another video, another argument to be laid out. But my contention is, anyway, that art is necessary in propelling the gospel, in changing the culture. We have pastors, we have evangelists, we have prophets, who I think are basically evangelists and pastors. So we have teachers, we have women's ministries, we have all these different types of ministries, and I think that there's a tendency to think of artists as kind of a lower status of Christian ministry, and a lot of the art, ministries can't really be called ministries. A lot of Reformed folk have a problem with C.S. Lewis and with Tolkien, and so they think that if you have gods and witches and wizards and in fiction, then you're blaspheming or something. Which I used to think too. I don't know. I've probably told this story on the podcast before, but I used to think that C.S. Lewis was a false teacher. I was convinced. When I was coming into Reformed theology for the first time, and I read Mere Christianity, and I forget what it was exactly, but something close to the end of that book just made me livid. And then I went on this rampage looking up like, was C.S. Lewis a false teacher? And then, of course, if you look that up, then you're going to find a bunch of stuff like, oh, yes, he was a false teacher. He said the word witch, and he has a witch in his books, and he called the Bible a myth, which I want to clear that up. When C.S. Lewis uses the word myth, when he relates the Bible to a myth or the story of Jesus to a myth, he's not saying that it's fiction. He's not saying that it never happened. He's saying that it's a story. It's a story, and it's the ultimate story. Stories are not necessarily untrue, right? Myths are not necessarily untrue. Not necessarily. But anyway, I just want to fight against this sort of legalism. I want to. And I think that it's necessary. We ought to have joy as Christians, and we ought to be jovial warriors going along in this cultural battle and being unapologetic for our faith. And we ought to do the same for our art. We ought to be unapologetic for art. I love C.S. Lewis. I love Tolkien. And those are pretty much the main two. But let's Christians, let's get back into the arts. Let's write books. Let's do drawings and paintings. Let's make beautiful music again. beautiful hymns and classical music, instrumental music. None of this over feminized worship music, when really it's just a performance. It's a concert, a performance to. It's self-centered, really, is what it is. It's man worshiping, talent worshiping. And I'm not saying that, you shouldn't try your best to make something good. Let's make music good. Yes, let's make our performance good, but let's not make it a performance first and foremost. Let's make it worship when we're worshiping. But yeah, let's write good books. Let's make good movies. Let's make good paintings, drawings, sculptures, buildings. That's another thing I want to touch on, is buildings. So one of the ways that you can tell the culture that we live in is degraded is by the art. So you take a look at buildings. Not too long ago, in the 50s, 60s, a lot of buildings, a lot of houses were brick buildings or stone buildings, or were just, I don't know, they looked nicer. They looked more artistic, more beautiful. They had contours in the posts and in the decks, and little white picket fences, right? Even the windows and the doors, you can tell a difference as compared to when you look around the neighborhoods now in our time, around where I live anyway, in Tabor. In our area, there's a bunch of big black boxes being put up. Excuses for houses, sad excuses for houses. They're not buildings. They're not beautiful buildings. They're just big boxes. Like, why would you want to live in that? It's just like a plain, flat, black siding with just rectangular windows. Everything is black or fake wood, and it just doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good. It's ugly. And everything is so square and perfectly edged. And there's no contours, there's no nuance, there's no beauty in it. There's no attention to detail. And this is one of the things that we can learn from God. He has attention to detail, right? He created every single minute detail in the world, on the earth. And he took care for each detail, for each molecule. How much more ought we to take care of our business, of our art? And so when we're building buildings, we ought to make them beautiful buildings. And you can see the degradation of our culture in the movies, homosexuality being celebrated. In the recent show Ironheart, I haven't watched it, but there's a transgender character, maybe even more than one. And they're just, some of the lines are just so terrible. It's like, how was this even made? How was this even made? And who likes this kind of, I don't understand. Who would like that? Some messed up minds, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. But even when you compare that to Iron Man, the first MCU movie, it's a good movie, right? It's a good movie. It's a good, titular hero's journey, a typical hero's journey story. And it's made better by the fact that you start off really kind of disliking the character. Like, he's kind of a douche. He's a douche throughout the first 3 movies, but you grow to like him because you see that he's quite self-sacrificial. By the end of the movie, at least, you can see his self-sacrificial side. And then he kind of puts on this persona for the public to see him as his selfish self, right? But that's not really his real self. He has to hide his true self in order to fit in with the society at large, with the world. And that should really tell you something. So when the art in our society, in our culture, is what drives the culture. So when you start, or is it the other way around? That's something I've been thinking about. Or is it the culture that drives the art? Is it the art that drives the culture, or the culture that drives the art? Or is it kind of a mixture of both? Sinful behavior pervades all things. But at a certain point, that sinful behavior becomes normalized within the culture at large, and that starts to pervade the public square. So transgenderism used to be a fringe, a very fringe position. Abortion used to be a very fringe position. Now it's normalized and celebrated, both of them. And like by a lot of people, a lot of conservatives too, will push those agendas. And well, homosexuality even more so than transgenderism, right? Normalized and celebrated and propagandized within our movies, within our books, within our news, with everything and everything, within our churches, right? So this is why art is necessary, and good Christian art is necessary. This is how we fight back against the woke Hollywood. We Christians, we start making our own movies. We start making our own pieces of art, our own buildings. Let's build our own buildings. Let's start our own companies. Let's write our own books. This is how we fight back. And that's not the only way. You know, there are some who will be politicians, some who will go into debating, public debate. Yeah, let's do that too. I love debating, so yeah, I mean, that's awesome. But those who are artists, you know, let's go at it. Let's do it. Let's be artists. Let's be poets. Let's be prophets in a certain sense. And I'll just read the conclusion of my essay here. Beyond stories, art can be paintings, architecture, drawings, acting, and music. I'm sure there are others, and I'm sure I'll be corrected, but my point is that you can see the decay of our society by the fruits that it bears. Look at the art and tell me with a straight face that we're not in trouble. Mumble rap instead of classical music. Big square boxes instead of beautifully crafted brick houses. Splotches of paint on a canvas instead of intricate, delicate, beautifully detailed paintings from the Renaissance era. It's all backwards. It's all upside down. We cannot ignore it, no. And I know that there is a growing resurgence in the young Reformed community especially, with a fire for art and beauty that is bent on crafting things that are pleasing to God through hard work, hard thinking, and hard living. Beautiful pieces of art. Music, paintings, books, films, sculptures, buildings that are designed to tear down the high places of the Baal worshippers, replacing what is ugly and wicked with that which is good and lovely. This is a just cause. Let us no longer seek to leave the arts behind as insignificant. Let's get out of the ditch. Let's dust off the book. Let's bring Christ into every realm and sphere of life, including the arts. Yeah. A call to action. A call to action. Let's stop viewing art, stories, paintings, sculptors, and music. Let's stop viewing these things as insignificant compared to the higher callings of pastoral ministry and politics and teachers, right? Like scholarship. And I do believe that those are higher callings in a certain sense, but the artist is essential to a culture. The artist is essential. And if we're not going to have Christian artists, then we are going to have non-Christian artists, anti-Christian artists. We're going to have propaganda against Christianity. And this is how violence happens. This is how Charlie Kirk gets killed. Right? When you feed the culture, the society with the idea that these normal conservative Christian views on marriage, on race, on gender are actually violence in and of themselves. They're part and parcel with Nazism, with fascism. That's what happens when we shut up, when we stay quiet, when we don't say anything. And for a moment, when we start to rise up and when we start to raise our voices again, when we start to speak up against this injustice, they'll come harder. They'll come harder at us. They will. They'll come harder. But it won't be that way forever. Again, I want to emphasize that I'm not advocating for a Christless message. Have Christ interwoven within your stories. Have, just like C.S. Lewis did with Narnia, or the Ransom trilogy. Even Tolkien in Lord of the Rings, right? I'm not saying you should totally just leave out any hint of Christianity. No. Let's make it distinctly Christian. Be a Christian artist who doesn't have to make a necessarily Christian book or film, or whatever else it may be. Do you make a Christian building? I mean, a church, but other than a church, do you make a Christian house? You can be a Christian who builds a house, and you can build the house beautifully and faithfully and wonderfully, and people can look at it and say, I wonder who made that. I mean, that is beautiful. And then, maybe they find out you're a Christian and they're like, oh, so what's the deal with this Christianity? These Christians, they seem to be really hard workers. They seem to really have a good eye for beauty and yeah, as it should be. We should be the ones that love beautiful things. So I want to make this a public call right now to anyone who's listening to this. If you enjoy listening to mumble rap, please reconsider that and start listening to classical music and hymns. Because mumble rap is objectively ugly music. It's ugly. It's not glorifying to God and Christ, even if you have Christian lyrics in them. There's no rhythm. There's no there's no beauty. There's no delicacy. There's no love in that. It's empty. It's soulless. It's muddled and confusing and yeah, it's just ugly. Anyway, yeah, and I hope that this will bring you to consider art as a meaningful and useful and necessary aspect of life and culture and society and Christianity. And I thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Hey, if you want to like and subscribe, I would really appreciate that as well. That's right now the best way that you can support our podcast. Yeah, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you disagree, why you disagree. Or if you agree and you just want to encourage me, that's always, it's helpful. It's nice. I always appreciate that. But anyway, yeah, thanks a bunch for listening to this. And just remember to seek the greatest good that you can, which is Christ, but to seek him in all things. Amen.